Good afternoon, and welcome to the Board of Education's FY24 Operating Budget Work Session. Today, we will begin the review of the Superintendent's FY 2024 Operating Budget Request. The order of review is reflected in the agenda. Staff will provide an overview of the Superintendent's recommended operating budget, followed by a review of the budget by chapter. Our second work session will be held on Wednesday, January 18th, 2023, and our final work session will be held on Tuesday, January 24th, 2023, both beginning at 10 a.m., and will include a review of the remaining chapters of the Superintendent's budget. I would like to remind everyone that the Board is scheduled to take tentative action on the operating budget at our Board meeting on Thursday, February 23rd, 2023. As we go through the budget chapters, I urge staff to point out pertinent issues that may be of concern to the Board. As always, Board members will be asking questions during our discussion section of the presentation, and will request staff to provide information on specific issues that will help them deliberate on this budget. Dr. McKnight, do you have any comments or issues you want to bring before the Board? No? Okay. All right. Let's proceed.
All right. Thank you so much, President Silvestri, and good afternoon, Board members. It is good to be here today for our first budget work session. It seems a little while ago in which I presented the budget on December 19th before winter break, but excited about the opportunity to come back and jump into the detail about the budget, going through the chapters and having that discussion with you. So I just wanted to start out sharing some high-level themes that I've communicated in my budget release on December 19th, but I wanted to reiterate today. And it is that our budget is one that reflects the needs of our school system, number one, and it's also one that reflects the needs of the largest school system in the state of Maryland. And when I say largest, I'm also going to say quickly growing. This year, we've welcomed back over 2,000 students into our school system, and that is exciting, and that's an increase by more than 2,000 students in the current year, 2020-23, and I will say we're projected to have another significant increase next year, 23-24. And so we have to continue to plan for where we are right now, seeing that our enrollment has continued to grow, and we expect that it is going to continue to grow over time, and we as a school system need to be prepared for that. So when you think about this budget is one that definitely focuses on our students and their needs. Knowing that we have over 161,000 of those students from pre-K to 12th grade, we want to be able to provide all of them with the opportunity that need to be successful in being college, career, community ready. We've also signaled the investment in our staff. We can't do this work without the staff that we depend on to accomplish all the tasks that we want to accomplish with students and our families. We've also made investments in our community in this budget. The community is a part of the school system, and we want to continue to reiterate that, especially after the experience of COVID-19. And we've also invested in many of our programs that we know help us excel in helping our students to be college, career, and community ready. So when you think about the budget, yes, it's about people, programs, students and their needs, all of the things that allow us to be able to get our students where they need to be, to innovate and support them with their learning. So the budget is also built on areas that are very familiar to you as board members, and those are going to be the pillars of the board's strategic plan. Those areas are academic excellence, well-being and family engagement, and professional and operational excellence. So those are also things that you want to continue, you will see tied back into what you have said is important as Board of Education members, that we agree and support the work in the school system needs to drive us continuing to focus on those priority areas. So these operating budget sessions are going to be an opportunity for us to get into more detail beyond what I shared on I'm already in February, on December 19th in the budget release. And this is our opportunity to dig in a bit more and look at, again, how those investments fit squarely into all the chapters of our budget, for us to have discussion about it, for you to ask any questions that you may have. We have the staff here available to talk specifically about what some of those investments are. And speaking of staff, I also want to thank our finance team, who I see here today, who did such a tremendous job in pulling the budget together to prepare for the December 19th release and for all of the work sessions that we have scheduled. So I wanted to say thank you so much for all of your work in getting this prepared. This is a large budget. As I shared on December 19th, it's a large budget. It represents $3.2 billion. And I certainly anticipate that because of the size of this budget, that there will be questions and much engagement for you and for the community to understand how we will have a return on these investments as we see that projecting the needs of the future in the system. So at this time, we can go ahead. Thank you very much. The PowerPoint is already pulled up. The recommended 2024 operating budget totals $3.155 billion, which is an increase of $235 million over the current operating budget. It does reflect an 8% increase, 8.1 to be exact, percent increase for the FY 2024 year. So again, while it's a large budget, we do believe this is one that will meet the needs of our students and what we project will be coming in MCPS. So with that, at this time, I will turn it over to our Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Hull, who will begin the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Dr. McKnight. Members of the Board of Education, thank you. It's exciting to be here today. This is an exciting time of year. If you're in the finance world and public education, we are here really to chart out our path forward as we look at how we're going to be allocating resources in the upcoming fiscal year. And so this is really an opportunity for us to take our priorities, put them down in numbers and words, and share them with the community so that everybody knows where we're going and how we're going to get there. So this has been a tremendous amount of work, both for the finance team, but the district at large. We have been in conversations with you as board members, many meetings with our community groups to gather their input, to gather your input. Of course, Dr. McKnight has been working very hard alongside us, making sure that this budget reflects the input and the interests of all of our stakeholders in our community, and especially our Board of Education. So I will stop there, and I'll turn it over to our Associate Superintendent of Finance, Mr. Rob Riley.
Good afternoon, President Silvestri, Vice President Evans, Dr. McKnight, board members. So the way we usually present the budget, we're going to show you what changed from last year. So as Dr. McKnight mentioned, it's a $3.2 billion budget, an increase of $235 million. So I'm just going to walk through some of our major funding sources. First one being our local or our county funding. So the request above last year is $225 million. You might hear $267 million too. So $267,000 is the amount above MOE. So because of the decrease in enrollment over the last 2 years, MSD altered the formulas for MOE. So MOE actually is a negative number. So when you take that, the 267 less the negative MOE, the change from last year becomes $225,000. So that's our local county funding request. The next item there is our fund balance, and it's changed to $25 million. What we're saying there is that right now in the FY23 budget, we have $35 million as a balancing revenue source to balance the FY23 budget. We want to go back to the $25 million. If you recall, last year, to balance the budget, we made some reductions, but we also closed the books early, and we had those additional savings. But it wasn't easy to do. So part of this year's revenue decreases is this $10 million that we are getting back in the budget to get back to the $25 million. Next item is state revenue. So this is right now our best projection at $15 million increase. We will find out in the last week in January what those numbers are going to be, and we'll see how close we came to our estimate. Normally it's the third week, but because we have a new governor, they allowed him to go to the fourth week. So that revenue will come in towards the end of this month. Next one is federal revenue. So very small amount there. What that represents is our budgeted title grants and our IDEA grant. So we made the decision, what you don't see there is ESSER. So ESSER right now is outside of our operating budget. So our federal grants are pretty close to what they were last year, actually a little lower there. But, you know, we'll discuss this later, but one of the things that we're going to be facing in this budget and the next budget is that ESSER cliff, right? So if we had ESSER in the budget, we would be seeing, minus a large amount, minus 35 million or, so we're not showing that here, but we are taking that into what we have to do for next year. And then the last item there for revenues, it's enterprise and other revenue. So this is kind of a technical increase because you're going to see a similar decrease when we look at expenditures. What this is we added $1.5 million for future supported projects. Normally in board meetings, we have an item on the consent agenda for future supported projects. And this is the county giving us pre-approval or authority for those grants that meet certain criteria. So normally we're at, a lower number. We're increasing that now. Next slide. So that was our revenues, the 235. And for a balanced budget, our projected expenditures are here. And this is also $235 million. And as Dr. McKnight mentioned, it's an 8% increase. So these are the large buckets of what we look at on the expenditure side. First one being enrollment changes. So as we noted, this is the first year in 3 years that we actually are turning around and we have increased enrollment. So with the increased enrollment comes an increase in students, so an increase in teachers and staff to the tune of 235 FTEs and $14.9 million. So that's one of the increases in this budget. The next item there is inflation, reductions, rate changes, realignments. These are what we normally refer to as same service budget adjustments. It's a misnomer because we're really not doing the same service. We're doing more because the needs grow. But one of the things that we've stressed in this year's budget is inflation. So this is basically the cost to turn the lights on, to fill the tanks with gas for our buses. These are these particular items, and that's $28 million right there. The largest expenditure item in our budget is salaries, benefits, and healthcare, and that's at $145 million. And there's a lot of drivers behind that. As you know, Blueprint is mandating, or one of the requirements of Blueprint is that we get to a $10,000 increase for teacher staff over 5 years. That ends on 7/1/24, and we have, we're going to meet that. The other requirement is a minimum of $60,000 for starting teacher salaries. That one we have until 7/1/26. We are in good position to do that as well too, but it's not just, we don't want to just meet that. We want to exceed that because, in this competitive world, we really want to do whatever we can to recruit and retain the best quality talent for MCPS. The last item there is accelerators, and what this represents is some of the items Dr. McKnight mentioned, things and interests that we've gathered through the community forums, through the Budget Advisory Committee. These are things that are going to help us move towards the board's strategic goals and our mission. That is $47 million and represents 127.7 FTEs. Just to give you a preview, so we're going to be going through the chapters in the next 3 work sessions. What we plan on doing is talking about accelerators specifically in the last budget work session. So we'll be doing that on the 24th. But that is the number, the $47 million. So I'm going to pass it back to Mr. Hall for next slides.
Great. Thank you, Rob. So as I mentioned at the top, we spent a lot of time meeting with our stakeholders, and we really wanted to ensure that this budget represented the priorities laid out in the strategic plan, but also the 4 specific priorities that this board had adopted this past summer. So one of those being build a safe and inclusive school climate and environment so that our students walk into a welcoming, warm learning environment every single day. And take note of the icons here. You will see these on the bottom right of some of the slides as we walk through the chapters going forward. And that is just to kind of help identify where we see alignment between some of the things that are included in the budget and these priorities. The second one being, of course, improve math and literacy rates. We know that that's a big focus of both the superintendent and the Board of Education, is making sure that our students are recovering from the lost learning time and really getting all of our students above the line. The third one, improve retention and recruitment. So we've had a lot of discussions this year about recruiting great teachers and great leaders into MCPS, and this budget really highlights that. We can't do this work without great teachers in every classroom and great leaders in every school. The fourth one is to support two-way communication, and this is something the superintendent has talked a lot about as we look to rebuild trust with our communities, make sure that that communication is flowing vertically and horizontally within the organization, but just as importantly, that we're communicating on a regular basis in an open and honest way with all of our community members so that they also feel a part of this budget, this process, and this school system. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the schedule. This is, of course, the first of 3 work sessions that we have. In today's work session, we're going to focus on Chapter 1. Now, Chapter 1 is our schools, and it makes up over half of the operating budget. That isn't to say that those are the only resources in the schools, but those are the ones specifically included within the school budgets. There are many, many other resources, whether it's special ed, English learner education, mental and social and emotional supports that are within the school but not necessarily captured in Chapter 1. So that's what we're going to walk through today. At the next work session on next Wednesday, I believe, we'll be going through Chapters 2 through 6. Again, Chapter 1 being the largest, which is why we're dedicating the majority of this work session to just that one chapter. And then in the third work session on January 24th, we will be focusing on chapters 7 through 10, which are some of the more operational components of the budget, and then also looking at that $47 million in accelerators that we will go through line by line. We thought it would just be easier to look at them as a group as opposed to individually throughout the chapters so that you get a sense not only of the total cost of the accelerators, but the reason, the thought behind it, the vision and the mission behind why we're putting forward those particular accelerators and how they support each other to move the district forward and support our students. So I will pause there and we can go to the next slide, and I believe we'll turn it over to Mr. Monteleone. I apologize.
Good afternoon. And thank you, President Silvestri and board members. I'm going to kind of kick us off here with an outline for our Chapter 1 of Schools K-12. And if we could go to the next slide. So what we're capturing here on this slide is really our elementary, middle, and high school funds represented. You're going to hear later in this presentation details around some of the other alternative and supplemental programs and services that we provide. In kicking off this chapter, though, I want to highlight how the other chapters are going to be designed and when other folks speak to you about those. And the two issues that I want to bring forward first is equity, and the second then is our mission. So when looking at our resources and our equity, we want to make sure the allocations of our resources as defined by people, time, and money create student experiences that enable all children to reach empowering and rigorous learning outcomes, no matter their race or their income. The second, in relationship to our mission, is closely aligned with the board's strategic plan as well as the blueprint, and that's ensuring students are college and career and community ready to achieve their academic goals of excellence and maintain a commitment to direct significant resources toward targeting teachers and support staff so that students improve and grow, and that we also have systems in place so that they can be provided professional development and career enhancements. So when we look at the outline that you have on the slide here, we identify salary and wages, contractual services, supplies and materials, and others. And I just want to highlight some examples that you'll hear as we move through the budget of what some of those items are. Obviously, salary and wages are pretty self-explanatory, but when we look at some of the contractual services that are involved here, we look at online tutoring, and we've seen some of that play out recently with the pandemic and relief funds. We also see the Career Readiness Education Academy as a part of that, and college tracks. And then finally, just as another example, we have two-way immersion services. When we look at supplies and materials, again, some of these are obvious, but textbooks, curriculum materials, and program supplies. And then finally, under the category of others, you see such elements as early college programs and dual enrollment, and exam fees. And again, I'm just highlighting some examples so you kind of have a context of what those particular areas are. As Mr. Hull noted in the lower right-hand corner, with these funding allocations, we're looking at the priorities of increasing math and literacy attainment, as well as increasing retention and recruitment. So I just want to make sure that as we move through the presentation, you'll hear from some of our colleagues. This slide and the budgets that are identified here, again, are for elementary, middle, and high. And it does not, though, include funding for pre-K, such areas as Head Start, alternative programs, the Montgomery County Virtual Academy, or special education. And you'll hear about those separately a little bit later on this afternoon. When we then move to the next slide, oftentimes we have questions about how our schools staff. So we have an array here of what the staffing looks like currently in this budget. We get questions such as, how does Montgomery County Schools decide how many teachers, administrators, and support personnel work in each of our schools? How do we determine which schools will be allocated additional staff to have reduced class size compared to other schools? So there are really 4 driving principles that guide that, and those are consistency. In other words, do we deploy similar resources, allocations based on similar school needs? Do we also differentiate based on what the needs of the particular population is at the school? Do we also provide administrators some flexibility so that they can make adjustments in how they use their resources? And then do we have transparency in how those decisions are made? And there's really 3 key factors around that, and you're very familiar with those. But one is what the enrollment is at a particular school. The second is what the needs are of the student population. And then the third would be, do they have any particular or unique programs at a particular school that would require the staffing to be different? When we then move on and get a snapshot of what is happening, if we could go to the next slide, across the district, we've arrayed this by level. So we're going to highlight some things that are happening within each level with student population. So at the elementary and high school, we're seeing increases in student population. And as a result of that, and then we've seen some increases in positions. And you see at the elementary, it's an increase of 1.5 for close to 23 positions. And then I'll go to the other end of the continuum where we see an increase at the high school level of 4.7. And so we've increased slightly over 78 positions. So there, you basically have identified the need for 101 additional positions. But at the middle school level, we have a decrease, all right? And so we see a decrease right now based on projections of 511 students and a decrease of staff of about 33, slightly just shy of 33 positions. So our net there is going to be 68 total positions. And the total increase is 4.1 when you do the ins and outs with the math. But that just gives you a little bit of a picture of what staffing is looking like in relationship to the enrollment. When we go to the next slide, we've also had some new schools come online. And so most notably, Clarksburg Elementary number 9. There are some ins and outs here as well, but the average, the increase is slightly over 15.65 positions for close to an additional $1 million. We also have some textbooks and media material that we're going to need to purchase, and that's going to be close to $800,000. At the new Harriet Tubman, which opened this fall, it was a K-4 school. They are going to be adding a grade level. There are some adjustments that we're going to make with some of the neighboring schools just based on transitions of students with some of the boundary adjustments. But there's going to be close to 4 additional positions, or 3.85 positions there, at a cost of slightly over $209,000. I will stop there. I think we go to the next slide if there's any discussion at this point that we want to either entertain or the board has questions.
Any questions from my colleagues? Please turn the lights on. Ms. Pedrowski.
Yep. Can you just speak a little bit more to the formulas for staffing in terms of like the needs of our schools and what that looks like for the public?
Yeah, so the staffing formulas we follow, they're actually in the back of the book, and we have class size guidelines. As Dr. Murphy mentioned, we are also looking at specific programs within the schools as well as needs. So we differentiate for schools with high farms rates. So that's how we do that staffing. And again, just to reiterate, so I mentioned enrollment for funding, but this enrollment, when we're doing staffing, this is projected enrollment. So we mentioned that at the last meeting, that we're talking about different numbers when we're talking about staffing as well as enrollment, as well as funding, so.
Ms. Harris?
Yep, just a general question, looking at slide 9 and the enrollment projections for next year. And then we know, it's a bit of an unpredictable because we do have a continuing influx of newcomers, and that's a hard number to weave into the formulas. But I'm guessing we don't know, and it's impossible to know whether the projections in increases and decreases will be felt sort of equilaterally across the county or more in certain schools or others. So could you remind us when in the spring the system looks to do its best guess of where these enrollment fluctuations will be and provide the staffing allocations to the schools?
Great, thank you for that question. So as Mr. Riley noted, that these are projections that the budget is built on. It will be varied across the district. So what we do is we start with the high-level district view as we look at enrollment trends, live birth rates in the county, the matriculation through our grades, to get a really high-level view of what we anticipate through, county-wide. And then once we get that number, we kind of work backwards to try and narrow it down to particular schools. And that, of course, is where it gets a little bit trickier because people are moving, across school zones, all of the time. And so we do go back in the late spring and all throughout the summer, review where we are with current enrollment, and adjust as necessary. So some schools, if they have more enrollment than we anticipated, they would see additional allocations and additional resources for more teachers, for example. The schools that have that maybe are coming in under enrollment or under projections, may lose a teacher and have that position shifted to another school. So we do our best to really stay on top of it as it is a dynamic and moving target, and then reallocate and deploy those resources in the most equitable, fair manner based on where the students actually do land.
And just from the perspective of the customer community, the parents and the students and the teachers, generally speaking, you mentioned so they'll get an initial staffing allocation in the spring, but then we keep an eye on what's actually happening and as enrollment numbers are coming in over the summer. But usually I'm trying to remember back from my own son's elementary school days, time by which we just have to say, this is your staffing number for this year, so that the school admins can say, okay, we're going to have this many third grade teachers, we're going to have that kind of thing. And then, because the parent community will also be, listening and getting that information as well.
Yep, absolutely. I appreciate that question. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Riley here to speak a little bit more specifically about the timeline, as I'm new to the system and haven't been through the summer process yet. But yes, there comes a point where we do need to, kind of end that process. And of course, if one school did see a sudden influx at some point throughout the year, that doesn't mean that we wouldn't adjust and make that adjustment at that time. But I'll let Mr. Riley speak a little bit more about the specific time.
Actually, Mr. Riley, if it's okay, I can speak to it as well. So I can talk a little bit about the process just because I've had the opportunity to be a principal in the system and have gone through this, and the timeline pretty much is still similar. So the schools begin to receive their staffing in February. When they receive their staffing, that is when they're able to look at that and be able to compare the staffing that they receive, because it is off a projected number to what their current enrollment is. The reason we actually put it out that early is because that gives the schools and the system an opportunity to go back and forth and say if the projection doesn't match or it does. And so if there is additional enrollment that needs to go to that school, then oftentimes you're going to have that balance. As Mr. Hall talked about the mobility that happens, where another school then we're presenting, this projection is over what we actually have. So we have a few months to be able to balance that out. Now, we've also learned some things over the years that we've been able to plan for. And the question was very good, and it was kind of connected to what Ms. Mandrowski was saying as well, because we know that in some schools, for the last few years, we know that we get enrollment that comes in more so in August. That's impacting international enrollment. So we know exactly where those schools are, and we've provisioned to work with the programs specifically that are often impacted by, like our ESOL programs. So we have that also planned into consideration of preparing for that enrollment to spike in the summer for late enrollment as well. So the process is one that I would say is very specific, starting in February through the summer, in which early on from February, I would say until April or so, when schools in Central are able to work through an adjustment if their projections are off. But then if enrollment changes over the summer, we still have identified specific spaces where we expect that enrollment to grow. And so that's why we have that staffing planned for in the Office of School Support and Wellbeing to be able to offset in those places where that enrollment grows. So that was really good, and it's important for our community to understand that, because we've experienced this enough to be able to identify those schools and put those supports in place, and so that they're not, scurrying at the beginning of the year.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Mr. Hall, could you just layman's terms explain fund balance for those watching that may not know it, just because it's kind of a big deal, a bigger deal than usual this year?
Yeah, I'll actually ask Mr. Riley to talk a little bit about how that works and where we kind of stand currently after the last fiscal year.
Again, just layman's terms.
Yeah, so layman's terms, fund balance, it's broken up into different components. Assigned fund balance represents our encumbrances, but that's getting a little too much into the detail. What you're talking about is our unassigned fund balance, which basically is what's left on the table at the end of the year after our books are closed and audited. So right now we have $9 million in unassigned fund balance. So when we look towards next year, what are we going to save towards next year? And I mentioned the $25 million. So that $9 million is a head start towards that $25 million as a component of funding our subsequent year budget. $9 million, I got to say, we run a tight ship because that's actually pretty low compared to other school districts. And the reason why we can keep it that low is we do financial monitoring within the budget unit and finance folks. All the different departments and divisions within the system are looking at where they're at on a monthly basis. So we know exactly where we're going to end by the end of the year. As I had mentioned, we're at $35 million unassigned fund balance this year. That was a little tough to get to, and we had to make we had to close the books early. We had to stop spending at a certain point. We're more comfortable with $25 million in unassigned fund balance that we can use to balance the next year.
Thank you.
Sure.
We can proceed.
Okay, I'm going to ask Mr. Montiglione to lead us through the next section.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. Thank you, President Silvestre and Vice President Evans. Dr. McKnight, I'm going to start off speaking about, I'm going to go over several of our district-wide programs that we have here in MCPS that fall in Chapter 1, and start with alternative education. So our alternative education program, otherwise known as the Blair G. Hewing Alternative Education Program, is housed in 3 centers. We have Down County at Plum Orchard in Silver Spring, Mid County, Blair Hewing right here in Rockville, Up County at the Cloverleaf Center in Germantown. And the Blair G. Hewing Center aspires to empower students to really utilize all the appropriate social, emotional, and academic skills to thrive in any setting. And the staff really serve in a variety of ways to foster those learning and social emotional needs in a safe, supportive environment. And we're committed to delivering personalized, individual, equitable instruction that serves the needs of each of the individual students that are in these programs through MCPS curriculum and at all the on-grade level and above standards. So we're really pleased about that. And what you can see here is just the overall budget, salaries, contractual services, supplies, materials, so on and so forth. And so just one piece that really leans into, and I love that we have our icons here, right? Our academic excellence, our teaching and learning. One small piece just to think about, the staffing generally stays the same. We just made a small little realignment, very small, to move and provide a registrar for Blair G. Hewing. They had never had a registrar before, a very important position that speaks to college and career readiness. And the realignment for that position just speaks to the vision of that program to ensure that our students are college, career, and community bound. So, next slide, please. So I'm going to speak a little bit here about the Montgomery Virtual Academy. And so the MVA really aims to foster a safe, inclusive online environment that meets the individual needs of all students in an academic setting where our staff and teachers can meet their individual needs and have them excel at as learners. And so we offer our traditional general education course offerings. We offer accelerated and honors courses in MVA. We are expanding through this budget access to clubs and extracurricular activities, and really expanding our well-being support through a PPW, for example, which is in the budget, and really leaning into engaging and supporting that quality live instruction. So the instructional experience a student has in MBA, which is reflected in this budget through positions that will provide the specifics that are needed in a virtual learning environment, which differ a little bit than our traditional setting. Additionally, the MVA provides an opportunity for not only working high school students and those students seeking other out-of-school opportunities, but those that want to take accelerated and advanced courses that may not be available in their home school. So we also see this as an equity lever, providing those services there. And so really all the money included in this budget is for non-enrollment based salaries. So in layman's terms, these are salaries that are included for the infrastructure, the administration, right, the teacher leaders that are part of this program. And you just heard an overview of how schools are staffed through the K-12 funding and the staffing formula. And this year we are pleased that MVA is aligned with all of our schools and on our staffing calendar timeline, and will be staffed accordingly, like our other schools, through our staffing formula. Next slide. We're going to move on to early childhood Title I and recovery programs. And so just a little bit of an overview about each of these programs I think is warranted here. So these federal Title I funds are allocated to schools to support with supplemental staffing to really increase the supports that our students receive. So just want to go through some of the examples, right, that speak to some of the board priorities. We're talking about parent community coordinators, RJ coaches and liaisons, support teachers, ESOL, EML teachers, special education teachers, focus teachers for science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Title I funding is also used for primary talent development coaches at each school. And these PDTs, as they're otherwise known, focus on specific coaching of teachers and modeling of lessons that are aligned to the students that we have in our Title I schools so that we can truly provide that on grade level instruction and enrichment at that level. So as you look through this slide here, we have that $29.7 million for our position salaries. This includes pre-K as well as the Title I and Head Start programs. And these are teaching and instructional support positions in the Title I schools and pre-K and Head Start classrooms. Want to make sure that we're highlighting that. And you can see here these realignments. 5.5 positions were realigned from central office budget in Chapter 2 to directly serve these schools in Chapter 1, giving a net increase of $231,000. And I also want to say these realignments are the results of a re-examination of the priorities of the school system and the budget allocations per the federal funding grant guidelines. And I want to be clear that these realignments represent zero, absolutely no reduction of services to students in any of our Title I or pre-K programs. And finally, the grant shifts. The grant shifts here that you see at the bottom of the slide are merely us internally shifting funds from one grant to another so they are properly aligned organizationally and budgeted properly. And I believe that is all I have for that slide. Thank you. You can go to the next slide.
Is this a discussion?
I think probably there's a discussion break in here, I would say. Yeah, we can go to that.
Ms. Wolf?
I just want to go back a minute to the fund balance question that you had. And you said we carried over 9 million. I thought we carried over 25 million, that we usually have to carry over 25 million. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so the distinction is unassigned fund balance to assigned fund balance. So the 25 million is what we have been using for the past 5 years to help balance the subsequent year budget. The $9 million is on top of that. So theoretically, we had $34 million, 25 we used to balance this budget, and $9 million was left.
Thank you.
Sure.
And can I just add to that as well? When we look at almost $3 billion budget in this current year, Mr. Riley alluded to the fiscal monitoring that we do throughout the year, and the team really does a great job of that. To end with only $9 million out of a nearly $3 billion budget, that's about 0.2 or 0.3% of 1%. So getting really, really close to nailing it right on the head. And so the team just does a great job. I just wanted to highlight the work that goes into that and how close we are with what we budget to what we actually spend each year.
Ms. Modrowski?
Yeah, sorry, I just kind of want to get back to the question I was asking before. And maybe Dr. McKnight, you're better suited to answer this. So I was asking about the formulas for staffing because there are some things that we've talked about at other board meetings, like, for example, the support staff at the middle school level for making sure that every child has I don't know if we said they were contracts or whatever, a plan for going forward for high school and has met with somebody. And I know that that's beyond the counselor's capabilities and roles, expectations. But in looking at the staffing according to what they're pointing out as far as the book goes, I don't see, what I'm trying to figure out is there are some areas where it reads things like a school will be given X or an extra, let's just say, assistant principal as an example, based on if they've got, so everyone from 350 or less students automatically gets one. And then it says something, reads somewhere along the lines of 350 to 600 or whatever. Does that mean if there's 351 expected students, they get one? Or does that mean that they have to be like a 600 to get the extra support? And is that determined based on the particular needs of the students as well as, so in other words, a school that has 500 students that are very high needs students may need that staffing allocation more than a school that has 500 students that,
Yes.
has fewer challenges.
Yes.
Things like that.
Your question, Ms. Modrowski, is a good one because it kind of gets at that equitable teaching and learning, equitable school culture space that we're
Right.
talking about. So I would liken it to the allocation being much like a classroom, and how you have a grade level, you have a certain number of students, and then you divide that up by the number of teachers that you have to make sure you're meeting the class size limits. So let's take your example, like the 351. So, let's say if you have one assistant principal and a student size of 350, you have 351 students? Probably not.
Right.
That school would not. However, you could look at this two different schools. One could have 351 and not get a second assistant principal. One school, let's say, could have 340, which is not a whole lot more students. But it really does come down to a lot of other factors that the team, and I'm going to say OSSWB and staffing, have a conversation about. Because if there are some significant needs at that school, if we're looking at data that says that there are incidents happening at that school, or we need more focus on teaching and learning to support the teachers from an administrative perspective, then those are the types of things that we take into place to then determine what is going to be best for those schools. What your example points out is we have a system that was probably developed well before any of us were here, that was based on numbers.
Yep.
Right? And so that's how we've come up with this criteria of enrollment is what drives staffing, whether it's the teacher, the administrator, the counselor, whatever it may be. What we are doing now are taking steps in the direction to balance that with making a decision around what that number is and being attentive to that, but taking the needs into consideration. Because this one school that has 340 students that may not justify another assistant principal may be in need of an additional counselor, depending on what the needs are. So I must say that's what I'm most excited about in terms of how we look at our budget and how we do our allocation. I think it was last year, looking at Ms. Gomez, we pulled the team in together and we were really talking about that and working with OHR at the same time to say we have an antiquated system that really is driven by numbers. But to a certain extent, now we've got to be able to look at how we move into these spaces of allowing that staffing allocation to take into consideration the number, but the needs. And that means looking at the data to support that, the academic data, the social emotional data, the discipline data, the wellness data, all of that, so that we can be more equitable in our allocation.
I appreciate that. That's what I was trying to get at, is just so that, because I do frequently hear questions about, well, why does that school have X number of counselors and this school doesn't? And when we're looking, and, we frequently hear from, using our counselors as an example, what their student counselor ratios are, but when you look at the book, it seems very widely ranged to some extent. But
Right.
I'm trying to ensure for everyone that we are factoring in. There's a lot of different factors that go into it, not just strictly numbers.
That's right.
And, and so then that just kind of leads me to, at some point, and I'm not sure it's going to be today, but the question about some of those things that we've talked about in terms of, like, would a support staff person, whether it be a part-time, a quarter-time, whatever type of FT, be allocated to like a middle school to help support the work of making sure that our middle school students have a plan for going forward into like even before high school? Would that be considered an accelerator, or is that considered a staffing thing?
Oh, that's a great question. So it would be, if it's not a position that we already have in the schools, it would be something that we would consider as an accelerator. But I must say, we've invested in a few accelerators over the past few years, and they're mostly in our high schools. I'm blanking on the name right now of the program that's in our schools where it's
Equal opportunities?
It's not equal opportunity, where they work with, equal opportunity is one of the programs, actually, but it's another where they have like these coaches that help support students. ACES, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, ACES, college track, those are examples of, many of those accelerators. One in our budget this year, which we're going to talk about in our last meeting, which are all of those accelerators that we put into, in many ways, contracting out those services to help our students be prepared. But you bring up a good point, particularly looking at that middle school space. We had a conversation in another meeting, and we've talked about this. The blueprint is requiring us to look at college and career readiness in 10th grade, which is backing it up. Last week I had a chance to have a conversation with our high school principals, and it is. So, nationally, you look at education and in high schools and know that our ninth graders, we often find that is the most difficult year for our students to be successful. Well, what happens there, and what can we do to back up all of these supports And it may be at some point looking at, even what we're doing at the middle school level.
Yeah.
To get there. We do have some time to plan that out, but I do believe that a big part of what we're going to have to do is not wait until we get into high school to put all of these supports there, but think about how we can build up those systems of support structure for our students that they're used to, and that when they get to high school, actually, although those supports are still there, they're not afraid or embarrassed to ask and just expect for them to be there as a
Yes.
support system for their success.
Thank you.
I wanted to add that I learned from Genevieve Floyd today that, like you said, the blueprint will create some of these opportunities at the middle school level. And we'll have an update about the blueprint on Thursday, so we will be able to delve deeper into that topic. Dr. McKnight, just to follow up on Mrs. Madrowski, I'm glad to hear that you're looking at resource allocation based on need, but could you say a little bit about how those decisions are made? Because I imagine that the need exceeds the resources. So do I envision directors lobbying for their school to get this additional, because there's a lot of need in Montgomery County. Just to enlighten us a little bit about how that decision is made, if you can.
Yes, and I enjoy your word, President Silvestri, lobbying, because that lobbying starts the minute that staffing comes out from HRD in February. And earlier, I was going to mention, our principals are not shy at all in being able to come forward and say the projection does not match, this is what we need. They are an advocate for what they need in our schools, and we welcome and appreciate that, because that's where we always want to make sure the resources are and present. As I think about this, it's just a number of things that we have to continue to do to meet the need. Acknowledging that the need is so different now, in all honesty. It's very different from any need that we've ever experienced as educators in the public school system, because the need has gone beyond maintaining academics. Now it's recovering, right? And still maintaining for some and accelerating. So when we think about this budget, when I say those themes of support, acceleration, and innovation, that's because they all have to be done at the same time, simultaneously, because we have to do that for everybody in the school system all the time now. And so those accelerators around, what we're doing to invest in our teachers and their professional learning continues to be a forefront. Tutoring for our students who need that support. The acceleration, the IB and AP placement. My goodness, was that last Friday? I had a chance to talk to a group of students who, one of the biggest, I feel like, equity gaps we've had in place, because our students have had to pay for AP classes. And so essentially, if you were a family that could afford it, I would expect that every child in that family could go through and expect and would take AP classes. When others who could not, it may not have even been a thought to them because they couldn't afford it. So those are the types of things. And when you think about AP, one of the levers for us being college ready and really focusing on that rigorous thinking, and I'm even going to say beyond college. If there's a student who wants to graduate, because I had this happen here in a celebration in this auditorium, who comes forward and say, I'm going to own a business. And this is what my business is going to be. And we have some students graduating and becoming business owners. Those rigorous learning opportunities allow them to be prepared for college, go to college, and those who want to do other endeavors in life, it still prepares them, because everybody benefits from having those critical thinking opportunities. So I just mentioned those as a few. We'll have a chance to dig into some of those accelerators more, but those are the types of things that are going to improve literacy in mathematics, because it comes into the space of teaching and learning, and the tutoring. The tutoring supports those students who need support, who are recovering their learning, but it also helps to accelerate, those who need that additional push, who are in an AP course for the first time, who'd like to be able to have someone help them if they need it to adjust to that. So those are just a few examples. I know I don't want to get into the next presentation after Mr. Riley or Mr. Hull said that we're going to talk about that at the last board meeting, but those are just a few that I want to highlight, because I think it makes it real as we're talking about schools, the staffing allocation, but then the programs that are combined with the staffing are the things that create all of this opportunity for our students.
Sure, those are hard decisions to make to decide which schools get the need-based support. Ms. Harris?
Well, I want to say one thing about that. Our schools, and particularly I'll say under the direction of Dr. Murphy, has been, working with OSA and many others in making sure that we're working with our schools to assess the impact of some of the programs as well. Like there are some schools who may say, we have really benefited from equal opportunity in the school, and this is why. Some schools, we've really benefited from the College Tracks program. This is how many students have. So it is really important for us to have our schools be empowered to tell the story about what's working for them. Because when you're looking at 210 schools, there's not going to be one right answer for all of them that's the same. But what we do have to do is learn, be astute to the data that's coming out of the schools, and expect that our leaders and our staff in the schools are paying attention to that so that we are having the appropriate programs available to the schools that are most impactful in that school. And to me, I think that's going to be very powerful and it continues to be a big, powerful point in our story, which is how do we know it's working for the students in that school? And how do we make sure when we see it working that we continue to have the resources available for that particular program? And it is not the same for everyone. Thank you.
Ms. Harris?
Yep, thank you. Just a couple questions. Slide 14, talking about the virtual academy. I'm not sure I have a good sense of what our enrollment in the academy is this year, or if we have a projection for where. I know that I did see that the enrollment applications for the virtual academy for 23-24 did open, and so I don't know what we're projecting. But one of the things that we've talked about is the virtual academy is a resource to close the opportunity gap, so that students at, Paint Branch who might want to take part in, for example, the Aviation Academy at Magruder, that might be an opportunity. And we've been piloting that, so I understand this year, mainly focusing on foreign language, making foreign language classes available to students whose home schools don't provide that. But I'm hearing from students all the time who want to know, and I think we've been talking about the course bulletin.
Yes.
And I wave that thing around a lot. And we actually have a 7-student team of high school students from all across the county working with, make sure I get Ms. Buckley, in curriculum to review and revise the course bulletin, to make it clear, to make it up to date, to make it a more nimble user tool from the customer perspective. So they've been looking at that course catalog, and they're seeing all these courses that sound amazing, but they're not available at their school. And they're asking when or will the virtual academy become a tool for them to access some of these courses that can't be or aren't available in all schools, and how we will. So first, that's the one thing. When are we going to expand the offering of virtual academy courses to students so that we can close some of these opportunity gaps? But also how, and I'm like, these kids are so smart. How we are going to be assessing interest from students across the county. Here's our course bulletin. You know where you go to school. What courses here are not where you are that you would like to take advantage of if we can make it available? How are we going to assess the interest? Because I know for years I've heard people say, demand drives instruction. How do we decide what courses are offered at a school? Demand drives instruction. But how are we assessing demand? I'm seeing these smiles from the former high school principal sitting there. And so, the students are sort of asking, as we look to expand the opportunity of the virtual academy, how will we decide, because a lot of these courses, it requires specialized instructors too. So it's not like we say, we have teachers for the virtual academy and know that we can cover all interest. Maybe we can and maybe we can't. So how will we be assessing that interest so we can actually plan strategically for what we offer? And then I just have to keep this bubbling on the radar. The idea that Dr. Joseph had last year, right about this time, I think we are one of the few, or maybe only LEA in Maryland, that is continuing a virtual academy as a permanent feature. And his idea was, well, how about if we made that available to students in other LEAs at a tuition basis, and it could be a way for us to, increase kind of the robust offerings, maintain the enrollment, and also make some money. So anyway, I just have to.
You mean pay for staff?
Pay for staff. So anyway, just have to keep that idea circulating, because we all sort of nodded and said, hey, that's a really interesting idea. But anyway, so.
So, Ms. Harris, I know there's lots of questions in there, and I have them. So I love that you prompted this, and this has been exciting work. I've loved working closely in my role last year, and then continue to do so with MBA and the directors and with parent leadership groups as we met with them over the course of the last semester. So let me take it first from currently, right? What we're talking about in terms of leveling that playing field, right? So one thing is, I know as a district, we don't want a student's educational opportunities necessarily be dictated or predetermined by their zip code or what maybe their classmates want to take in their school, right? We really, in an optimal district such as this, with a variety of resources, want to be able to provide them to as many students as possible. So currently, we have elementary students taking math 4-5 and 5-6. Right now, about 125 students. And we kind of refer to these. I'll give you a current state, and then I'll go to some of the big overarching themes that you touched upon. So about 125 elementary students right now accessing that level of instruction that would not necessarily be available due to the enrollment, right, and the ability to staff those courses in their schools. And the virtual, and this is when, if you dig into the staffing, this is where some of the staffing that we have as realignments speaks to that hybrid and virtual scheduling. That's a lot to be figuring out, how are we going to make this fit an MBA with your current schedule? And so this is one of those unique positions in the MBA that is represented in the budget. And additionally, we do have students taking, I'm going to mess up the level, but I feel like it's French 4, right? Right now. So where we are in terms of next steps. There is an opportunity here, and we began these discussions for the next school year with the MBA administrators as well as the directors who support the school right now to provide an accelerated or an additional course in the 8th period, if you will, right? So you asked these detailed questions, so I'll try to address them. So there are some schools right now, I know that Blair does this, in my former school we did it as well, where you can offer a course during 8th period. Right. So, and the schools have activity buses on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and those activity buses run and they leave at 4:30. And there's an opportunity to run courses 2 days a week that meet the same hour requirements of the state for the credit, where you could have students at their home school, right, sit there in the library, access the virtual instruction from the library, what have you, okay? And you're having a virtual academy teacher teach that from wherever they may be located, whether it's the virtual academy or their home office. So this is absolutely a possibility, and there is actually agreements with our association partners on how to compensate teachers for this, and so we have all of this built in. So now it's just a point of, how do we know what the demand is, right? Where do we go from here? So leaning into kind of that, I love that the scheduling was brought up, and Dr. McKnight spoke about the staffing calendar. So when that staffing comes out to principals, right, in I think it's February 16th, I believe, right, the principals are going to look at that staffing that they got. They're going to look, and I'm speaking specifically like at the high school level here, right, because those are some of those accelerated boutique classes. They're going to say, what do the kids ask for? How many sections of this do I have? How many sections of that do I have? And if they can't run, like in, I don't know, an AP Calculus BC class, for example, because there's only 5 kids who want to do it, they know. Each school knows which of their students have asked for courses they can't take. So it's incumbent upon us, and we're doing this right now, to develop a structure and a process whereby we poll and reach out to all 25 high schools and say, you let us know, what are the courses and we can group, right, and catalog these. What are those courses that some students asked for that you just couldn't run in your schools, and we can group these by academic department, and then we can work to recruit teachers to teach those through that MBA. So it will take some legwork. I do imagine down in years to come, a perfect scenario, right? We're not there, but in my dream mind is that if our school master scheduling software could talk to our MBA software, right? And so imagine a student going into their, because now the students, like they sign up for their courses on Student View or through Synergy, right? And they go in and they could see like, this is how these are the courses available in my school. These are the potential courses available at MBA. And during that normal window, we would know by, the normal staffing calendar, what students want. We are working through this. So the first method I spoke of is what we would be doing this year. We would like to get to that point. And we've done great work with OTI and with curriculum and with budget to really align the MBA to that staffing calendar. It was not previously, right? Now it is, so we are in a position to do this. We feel very, very good about where that's headed moving forward.
Yeah, just 2 quick points. Thank you for mentioning the 8th period thing, because one of the things, having taught at Edison, I know when you try to align schedules and opportunities with students from multiple high schools, all those high school schedules are different. And unless we were to say, this is the high school bell schedule.
And everything else.
In MCPS, we have 25 fiefdoms right now. So I appreciate that as looking at that really pragmatically. As this is an opportune time when we can make this happen. And the one, kind of question/suggestion is when the students currently, I think when they're looking at, it's time to enroll, they're looking at in Synergy, Canvas, they're seeing courses, and unless they are sort of nimbly looking also at the MCPS course bulletin, they know what's at their school or potentially at their school. They might not know the wide array of courses that are available system-wide. And I bet you this group of students who are working with Ms. Buckley to review and revise the course bulletin and create a more nimble, useful, hopefully platform tool could find a way to survey students on an annual basis as, to make part of their enrollment process. Here's the course bulletin. Look here. I just bet you these students that are putting in this work can come up with a way and a structure and an idea to make that a tool that can be used to sort of assess interest instead of relying just as out of school. Because anyway, they're wicked smart, those students.
I want to thank you for that, Ms. Harris. I love that idea. Essentially, a virtual course catalog. That way, when students are making their schedule or planning for their schedule the next year, they can see what's available in their school and then what's available in addition to that. I would imagine looking at both would allow them to make the best schedule for themselves, looking at both opportunities. So, yeah.
If I could, I'd take this.
Absolutely.
We are sort of accruing a database of interest.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Dr. Murphy, I think that's a great idea we can employ for our future enrollment process. It's great.
Yes, and I was just speaking to Mr. Monteleone. I want him to kind of speak a little bit about how the MBA has shifted. So if you could elaborate a little bit on that, I think that would be helpful, and it supports what Ms. Harris is saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we know, right, and I think it was referenced that we may be the last LEA, right, with the virtual academy, and these sprung up in the wake of the pandemic, and it was a response to a specific need, primarily around COVID or medical conditions that would preclude a student from being present for live instruction, right? And so, as we know, that creates some logistical and problematic issues with staffing and enrollment and in and out and back and forth. But now that we have reached a place of stability, I wouldn't necessarily call it post-pandemic, but some stability. What we found over the last year and a half is that the MBA is really serving some students that thrive there well. And if you look at our choice programs, and you look at the demographics and student populations of our choice programs, right? And then you look at the MBA as a choice program, and you look at the demographics, and I'm going to believe it's 60% more or less students of color, and over 50% farms. Okay? So when you think about that, a population of students that we are serving well and that are accessing the instruction that meets their needs, as we worked with our internal and external stakeholders, we leaned into that vision. and certainly and working with Ms. Rubin and her vision for this as well. I mean, where we are headed is really a part of the aligning it to the staffing calendar is, and some of the partnership we've done with OSIP, is to have the MVA as a choice program, just like Blair's Magnet or RM's Magnet or Poolesville's Magnet or any other of our choice programs. So it is a choice program. It's not a competitive application-based program. It's a choice program that we offer. Are you interested? Yes, let us know, right? And then we fold that into the application and choice window that we already have established. Why should we treat the MBA any differently or any less than any of our other special choice programs? So that really is the vision, as we enhance our extracurriculars and enhance the program offerings and the academic offerings and listen to what our students are telling us. We do have, to remind the board, right, we have a long history of IIS, online pathways, and now online and virtual tutoring, where we have provided students, unfortunately, who may have medical issues or social emotional issues that preclude that in-person instruction. We can still provide that instruction. And for those students who are in MBA right now, for those reasons, they're in, right? They're grandfathered in. You're being successful. We want to make sure that it remains that way.
Ms. Wolf?
You know, I've long been concerned about the virtual academy and being able to access the program, so I want to thank Ms. Harris for that question. My question is, can you access clubs at other schools through the virtual process? Virtual academy, through anything? So if I'm, like, say if I'm at Blair and I want to participate in a club that's at Paint Branch, can I access that if Blair doesn't have a club like that?
That is a great question. To my knowledge, we do not currently have a codified structure or process, right, for that. There are hundreds of clubs in any one school alone at the high school level, for example. It is absolutely feasible and possible. There is not currently a system, and Ms. Wolf, it wouldn't necessarily go through the virtual academy, right? We could coordinate that. I can speak with Ms. Shella-Cherry, right, about this and see what the potential is for that. But with the technology, and as we've learned to be innovative coming out of the pandemic, I don't see a reason we couldn't explore a way to kind of norm that.
I was just thinking because I remember a lot of our LGBTQ kids wanted a club, and there was no club in their school, so I wondered if there was a way they could access the club through another school that did have one.
Ms. Wolf, that's great. I did want to say, what we do is some of the programs that we have are, we invite students to participate in generally, based on interests. Like I think about minority scholars, that's one where, all the schools kind of come together. Oftentimes, Peace Jam, like we had last year, again, representing, all of our different schools. So I would like to highlight that because I think that's one way in which we bring the opportunity for students to engage collectively with others from other schools if they have an interest area. So I think it's something that we can continue to build up, based on your question, as Mr. Montileone said. But I just thought those came to mind immediately when I thought about where are places where I see our students come together and congregate that have, similar interest.
Ms. Rivera-Oven?
Thank you. So, I'm new, so sorry if this is repetitive, or you guys have already covered this, but I'm really interested to know the concentration of students that come from what demographic areas and geographic areas in the county. And also, if a student doesn't have broadband access, but they want to partake in the MBA program, how do we support that student?
Sure, great question. So I don't have the geographic breakdown disaggregated, but I'll make note of that. And we have it by school. I mean, we can certainly provide it. So with the MBA, we provide for students we provide them with all the technology they need. If you were to see the MBA space at Goody, there are Chromebooks, there are hotspots, there are MiFis, and there is a distribution area there located, and when students have, if there are issues for students being able to receive this or being able to get themselves to Goody, we can work with PPWs and others to ensure that we are literally bringing the materials to their homes. But when it was launched, not this past summer, but the summer before, there was a great deal of time spent in July and August with distribution of materials, and even the beginning of this school year. So just like the beginning of the school year, right, in a traditional school, you go and you get your textbooks the first week of school. The way the MBA does it is they have a materials distribution during pre-service week, where the students are coming up and accessing all their textbooks, their Chromebooks, their hotspots. So it doesn't matter about broadband access. We provide that for you through a MiFi and all of the materials. So, I mean, one thing we learned from the pandemic, we talk about innovation, right? So I was a principal during the pandemic, and we had every single student had an art supply kit for Art 1, and it was different for advanced art, and we had distribution centers, and the kids picked them up. It's the same model. So anything a student wants, from MiFi to a Chromebook to art supplies for their art class, is available, and if they can't come get it, we ensure that it's delivered.
Ms. Yang?
Thank you. So I'm so excited to hear about this 8th period being a potential model we use for students across the county. Do we have a timeline or when to pilot this? Or?
So we actually looked to see, like, is there a way potentially to do this, like build this in for the coming school year off the top. And so we did look, we looked at schedules, and we tried to see, is there any way that we could align high school schedules to an MBA schedule? And the MBA is on a block schedule, and schools are on a variety of 7-period schedules, and some are on block schedules. So without that, we land, and this is all within the last month or 6 weeks, right, that we've really been honing and hammering out the vision. So in terms of a timeline, what it would be was we would then be identifying the courses based on what students don't get in their 25 high schools. We would then aggregate those numbers, right, and see what those numbers are per course and see what's available. Ultimately, it's going to come down to staffing, right, in the MBA. But this really isn't just a model that could be used solely with MBA staff. But in terms of a timeline, I would hope, right, I anticipate that we would be able to identify some courses based on what the landscape looks like for courses at each high school that, you know, we see like course X at 13 high schools was not offered, then that seems to be demand there. And then we would work to offer that in the fall on the Tuesday, Thursday schedule, right? So there are ways that you can do this, working with our association agreements with MCA. I've looked at the language. It does provide for that. So we have the infrastructure. We just need to move forward.
Right. Great example, like sign language is offered at some of our high schools, but not at all high schools. And students often express interest in learning sign language. And I can see, you know, if it's offered, it might get student enrollment in the virtual academy. But very excited to hear that this is in the works. Thank you.
Mr. Kim?
Yeah, thank you. I had two-ish more follow-ups about MVA. The first is a clarifying question. So based on what you said, there was those 125 elementary school students taking that advanced math course, and then French maybe 4, so that some students were enrolled in. So are those currently, those aren't being offered as an 8th period currently, or?
No. So we have there's a staff member, MBA, and it's also provided for in the budget, who literally spends a good portion of their day. Oops, am I not on?
It was on.
Yeah, here it is.
It's on.
I'm sorry. I keep getting the questions. I should leave it on. So there is a staff member who's one of their primary roles is to work with 135 elementary schools, or 36, I can keep track, to see and literally figure out when it works to have X student take that accelerated math, and then works it into the established schedule of MVA with those teachers. It is line-by-line work, so they are taking it. The elementary kids are certainly taking it during the day, and the higher level foreign world language students are also taking it during the day. But what the reason that can happen, but it really takes one-on-one work between the counselor at MVA and the counselor at X school, and what it may mean for the student, right? So hey, you have a hole in your schedule 6th and 7th, or you can move your 7th period, do a different, you don't need your 7th period, it's your senior year, whatever. Oh, and MBA is offering this during their block in the afternoon. So maybe you don't have your 6th period, but then you take the MBA course 7th. So at this time, we're doing it on an individual basis for students in a very small number of schools. That's how it looks right now.
Thank you. So the idea is by implementing the 8th period model to alleviate some of the constraints of the logistical kind of challenges and the scheduling challenges. So the idea is to kind of move away from that and towards the
It would behoove us to explore everything.
Right.
How we could potentially allow students to access during the day as well. And I think it can be done. There was a lot of other just logistical and staffing things that we really been working on just to get it where it is, but this is the next level of work. Ultimately with an 8th period, I don't know that you're going to be able to offer a super wide variety, right? You may have X number of courses, a single-digit number of courses here and there. But I think what everybody is picking up on is we are at a place where the opportunity exists, the infrastructure is here, and the innovative division and desire is in place to make this happen. So yes to the 8th period, yes to continuing to explore how it can happen during the day, and potentially other larger opportunities for that 8th period. But kids have athletics, right? They have clubs, so that 8th period doesn't always work for every student.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Last question, because we need to move on. Ms. Madrowski?
Yep, I have a couple of quick things. One thing I wanted to follow up on is I did hear from somebody that apparently the MVA has a very robust virtual LGBTQ club open to both MVA and in-person students, and that principals of high schools have a flyer that they are going to send out to the students to let them know that they're all eligible. The alternative programs you mentioned, they're also considered choice programs, correct? Because it's an opt-in program now, currently.
So technically, yes, it is a choice program, and parents can choose. When I say choice programs, we designate some programs on our website as MCPS choice programs.
Right.
So that is how I use that, right? There's a website, they're featured there, and so MBA would be a part of that.
But alternative programs is not part of that?
Not under like the curriculum and instruction choice program umbrella. Okay,
So
but it
we
is
need to talk to
technically
somebody about that?
it is
Yeah.
a choice program.
It is.
You can choose.
Right. Okay, I just wanted to make sure so we can work on moving that into that section. Going all the way back to everything you guys are talking about with the scheduling aspect and the things that you hope to see, Mr. Montiglione, sorry.
It's okay.
I'm just getting it wrong.
Montiglione, but it's okay.
That would be something that an accelerator like the middle school coordinator, college and career coordinator could potentially help with as well. What is the difference between a program versus a school? So the RAP program, for example, our recovery academic program, why is that not considered a school?
So
Because I consider it like an alternative program school, but I don't think that staff does.
So I can give you an overview of the reason, and there may be others who can speak more specifically, but the state of Maryland has specific language and guidelines for what constitutes a school in the state of Maryland, right? And so some of our programs are in essence, school experiences, but not technically schools under the Maryland law and guidelines.
So they don't get a director assigned to them? Or they just?
Sorry, RAP?
Well, like, using RAP as an example.
Okay, with the RAP reporting structure, right, we have a principal and special assignment who works there. And then I work directly with that principal, and I've been meeting with the RAP folks monthly, but there's not necessarily a director at this time, because the reporting structure this year is such that it's directly with me.
And it's small enough, that makes sense. I was just curious more because the MVA and alternative programs, as far as I know, seem to fall into a different category. My last question is, in the budget, I want to say maybe it was this time last year, during public comments, we heard talk about, conversations about updated equipment or different types of more specialized equipment. I'm assuming that comes out of the operating budget, not capital, right? But I didn't see anything in here. Where are we with that, and is that something that we're continuing to do or no?
Yes, I remember that specifically. When Ms. Rivera Oven spoke about, she asked a question earlier, I thought about, we learned so much through the budget hearings, and last year, we had a family come forward and bring an example of the screen, which was a perfect example of, my child is looking at a screen, it needs to be a big enough screen for them. So we actually have used a lot of our ESSER funding to support the technology. I mean, we've been able to do that over the last couple of years, which is great. But we do have some in the operating budget, some of the technology pieces, knowing that we continue to build off a sustainability plan for technology, so it's not as much on ESSER as it was when we first were experiencing COVID-19. So I would say both, do a lot of grant funding, and we also have it in our operating budget. And we are continuing to hear from our staff and students and families about what are the things that they need, like that perfect hearing, in which a family could communicate, I need a bigger screen when my child is looking at things all day. And I think we'll continue to learn as we're doing this. I just want to point out, this is a silver lining from the pandemic, you all. I mean, there were so many unfortunate things that happened, and if someone had come to us before the pandemic and asked, can you do this? Right, we would have said no. But here we are, creating access and opportunity in so many different ways, so it's a silver lining and a celebratory opportunity.
So I was just curious in terms of the budget, though, so under furniture and equipment, it has a dash. So that's why I was curious, is if it's incorporated into this budget or if it's just strictly external funds for right now.
Yeah, and it might be under another chapter that we'll discuss where that is. But I'd just like to add on, too, we had a good discussion on our MVA. So if you recall, last year, MVA was something, as Dr. Monteleone mentioned, was stood up with ESSER funds. Last year, we actually made the intentional decision to incorporate that within our operating budget. So when we talk about accelerators in the next two work sessions, or the third work session, we'll be talking about other items that are currently in ESSER that we're talking about putting into the operating budget. But that was our first example of something that, we saw the benefits of and we moved into operating.
Ms. Sharon?
Just to jump in real quick, because I heard there was some confusion around this, I just want to clarify that all of our technology equipment, from student equipment to our staff equipment, actually comes from our capital budget, and it's built in that way. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody had clarity.
Thank you for sharing that.
Two quick questions, I think, because we are running very late. So the investment in pre-K, 29.7 million. How many seats does that buy us, or how many classrooms, additional classrooms, can we expect to see?
Yvonne, do you have the number of seats? The number of seats for pre-K with this year's investment?
29.7 million buys us how many seats for students in pre-K and/or classrooms? 29 million. That's what it says here on slide 15. Proposed budget, 29.7 million for position salaries, including pre-K. Is that?
I believe that's 4,300 students that we're budgeting for in pre-K. We will get additional, we're waiting to see when the governor's budget comes out, and we'll see what the allocation for pre-K out of the blueprint is as well. And that will have an impact.
So just for those watching, that was 4,300 students, and we expect additional money from the state with the blueprint?
I'm sorry.
So yes, so we currently are funding approximately 4,300 pre-K students. We're also having the budget 18 teachers, special education teachers and paraeducator positions for the PEP program that is going to be integrating the general population of pre-K and special education students. And then we'll have to wait also to see when the governor's budget come out, if there's additional funding in the blueprint for pre-K, and that will add additional seats to our.
Thank you, that's very helpful. That's a big increase from what we've been able to do in past years, so fingers crossed. And the ESOL budget of additional 25 positions, that is slide 16, but you say that's coming up next, so I'll hold my question. So we can move on. I just want us to be cognizant of time. We budgeted until 6 o'clock, and we're not even halfway done with the slides. So let's hold our discussions until we finish the entire presentation.
Okay.
So board members, please jot down your questions, and we'll stay here as long as you want, but just want us to be aware of time. Thank you.
Okay.
You can proceed.
So we're going to move now to student services. I want to thank Mr. Montiglione for his presentation and that conversation. We're going to go back a slide, actually. If you could go back to, I think it's slide 15. And I'm going to ask Ms. Hazel to speak to this slide about English learners and multilingual education, or ELME. And then Ms. Wiles is going to transition us through the remainder of the slides addressing special education. So Ms. Hazel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon, President Silvestre, Dr. McKnight, and members of the board. I just have this one slide to talk about our emergent multilingual learners. That's the new name that we have transitioned to from ESOL, so emergent multilingual learners, or EMLs. And we'll just talk about the staffing in schools today. So that's all we're going to focus on. And then, as Mr. Hull said, this is just for schools. And then next week, when I come back, I'll talk about Chapter 4 and the programs that are in the Office of Curriculum and Instructional Programs, including the programs that support these students. So we're just talking about staffing in schools today. And I'd just like to remind people that this is our largest student service group. At 18% are emergent multilingual learners, and quickly growing every year. We want to just really highlight the work of the teachers in the schools that support our English learners. They are really oftentimes the first face that our students see when they come to schools. They welcome our families in the school building. They also assess our students for their language proficiency. And then they have the work of teaching our students that academic language, working alongside the general education teachers for that content instruction. So together, working together, they provide grade level access to the curriculum for our students who are also learning English. And so it's certainly a challenging task, but we have a lot of really excellent teachers working with our emergent multilingual students. So you can see there our proposed budget is $73.8 million for salaries and wages, and that puts us at 825 full-time positions in schools. 760 of those positions are teacher-level positions. 17 of them are resource teachers in high schools, and we have 48 positions that are paraeducator positions across the 3 levels. So that is what the $73.8 million represents there. We also have a significant growth. We are anticipating growth of about 2,000, more than 2,000 students in our schools for next year. And so we are requesting an additional 25 positions for school-based staff for our ESOL positions. And then we also have a realignment. So we want to take one position, full-time teacher-level position, and a .85 paraeducator position, and realign it from Chapter 1 to Chapter 4, which is going to be where I come back to you next week to talk about programs, and that will be for our CREA program, Career Readiness Education Academy program, which provides services for our older students that come to us, 18 to 20 years old, and may not be able to graduate. So that is what we want to provide. We are getting a significant number of students coming to that program. I'll talk about that next week. And so that's where we want to do some realignment. So that's really all I have to share today around the staffing, and then come back to next week for programming. So I'll hand it over to Ms. Wiles to talk about special education.
Good afternoon, President Silvestri, Vice President Evans, Dr. McKnight, and distinguished board. So in this first slide, you'll see our ask for the FY24 budget is $305.5 million, which accounts significantly for our salaries and wages for approximately 4,277 positions in special education for the various programs that we run for our students. In addition to that, I'll talk about our increase in contractual services related to the challenges that we have with filling some of the related service positions. And that accounts for $2.65 million in the budget. Supplies and materials, which are for our deaf and hard of hearing students, and our assistive technology supplies for our students, $380,000, as well as employee benefits, equipment for our physical disabilities students. And in addition, the $305 million also accounts for IDEA grant funding in the amount of $33,567,372, split between both Chapter 1 and Chapter 5. Next slide. So in our total budget, we have asked for a significant increase in our positions based on our projections for growth in our student population, particularly what we're seeing in our infants and toddlers programs. There's increased numbers of students who are being identified earlier, which means we need to increase our professional staff, both teachers and paraeducators. Specifically, we've asked for 61.9 special education teacher positions, 9 speech pathologists, and what we're finding is that a good number of the infants and toddlers students are being identified with autism. Speech and language is an area where many of our students with autism require services, so we need to increase our numbers of speech and language pathologists. 2.3 occupational and physical therapy positions, 65.5 special education paraeducators who support many of our discrete programs, as well as additional funding for our private duty nursing, which I'll talk about in the contractual services. For our specific programs, our learning and academic disabilities program accounts for the majority of positions that we're requesting. We've requested 18 teachers and 20 paras for that position approximately. Our homeschool model students, who are students in their neighborhood schools, we've asked for 15 teachers, 1 para, and 8 resource room teachers. And then our autism teacher programs, we've asked for 9.7 teachers and 19.27 paras, again, to address the significant number of autistic students that are entering the school system. Similarly, for PEP, we've asked for 6.1 teachers, 0.6 speech pathologists, at 1.05 OTs, 1.2 PTs, and 8 paras. Next slide. In the With regard to realignments, we have several positions that we have realigned. We have a 1.0 instructional specialist position for our extensions program to help service the program for all of our sites. 1.0 social worker in 10-month position in our bridge program. As well as we've added a .5 staff development teacher in our specialty schools, Sandburg, Rica, Longview, and Stephen Knowles, and a .6 to Rock Terrace. We've also added a .5 reading specialist to Sandburg and Rock Terrace. Our nursing contracts, we recently renewed our contract for our private duty nursing services. We've seen an increase in the hourly rate across the board for agencies, which accounts for the addition of contractual services. This is also the case with our speech and OT contracts, where we are now having to go out and look for those contractual services in order to meet the needs of our students. So the contractual services have increased while we continue to look for and recruit related services providers. We are obligated to provide those services for our students. Next slide. One of the things I don't have an appendix, but I will say that the other added piece to this is that the new Clarksburg Elementary School is accounted for in our budget request.
It's on slide 19.
If we could go back to slide 19.
Thank you. And the Clarksburg site will house an autism program as well as PEP classrooms. We are staffing it with 6.8 special education teacher positions, 2.0 PEP teachers, 2.7 speech pathologists, a 0.5 occupational therapists, and 10.9 special education paraeducators.
I'm sorry, can we go back one? Must be slide 18. There we go. Okay, very good. Thank you.
With a total budget of $1.1 million to account for those new positions at the new site.
And so those are that's the final slide that we have for today. The rest are actually an appendix. And I appreciate your eye on the time, Ms. Silvestre, because we would be here all night if we were going through these. The slides in the appendix, which were also posted to the board docs, are really the same slides. They were just the finance team's version of the slides, and so there's just a lot more detail there. They're a little bit more boring, and we had our communications team help us spice this up a little bit. So if you do want, if anyone wants to see more of the detail, they are available in the appendix there. But we wanted to make this a little bit more high level and a little bit more appealing, so we're happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Hall,
Appreciate that.
when you say the appendix, the information that you two just gave in terms of the position stuff, is that in the appendix? Is that what that is? Because I enjoyed hearing that.
Mrs. Wiles
so.
was speaking about, there is so Appendix C is for the staffing that we were talking about before. Appendix D is special ed staffing and goes into all the different enrollments in each of the different areas and the proposed staffing adjustments. Yeah.
Wonderful.
That's in the budget book, I'm sorry.
So glad to hear that we are somewhat on track. So I will ask my colleagues to please turn on your lights if you have questions. And yes, Ms. Harris.
Quick question, when we're talking about our emergent multilingual learners, and you were talking about the staffing increases, that first of all, a projected increase in 2,000 students. That's a lot of EML students for next year. And when you were talking about the additional EML teachers, are we continuing, and you mentioned the working alongside the general education classroom teachers, so are we continuing to look and implement and I can't remember if we call it team teaching or co-teaching model?
Yes, we still definitely are implementing the co-teaching model in many of our schools. Some of them have some challenges with the logistics and the number of teachers they have. So at a minimum, we are asking that schools are co-planning together, looking at data, talking about what language, academic language needs to be taught in the classroom along with the content, so that if there is not ELD teacher that can co-teach with the general ed teacher, that the general ed teacher is very much aware of the language that must be taught in the classroom to go along with the content, and vice versa, when the students are working with that ELD teacher, that they are clear about what the content is so that they can stay at grade level. But our goal is to have as many co-teaching opportunities as possible, particularly with English language arts.
Yeah,
it can't happen in all areas, but particularly.
Thank you. So we had some really compelling testimony last January from an EL teacher from, I think, Key Middle School, talking about the need and the value that approach brings. And looking at, we talked a lot about our special education, our EML staffing, our special education staffing, teachers, paras, related services, therapists of all types, speech, PT, OT speech, nursing. So a lot of growth here. My question is now, do we have a sense of, are those professionals out there to be hired?
That's a great question. I wish I could say an emphatic yes. We're working closely with OHRD. One of the things that OHRD is doing is that if we find someone who is recently graduate or will graduate soon, we're offering early contracts. We are exploring options with creating additional partnerships with universities. So we are working hard to fill those vacancies. That is the unfortunate part, that we have to have these positions. We have to increase them. We're still working with vacancies and some long-term subs in certain circumstances, but we're working very closely with our partners in OHRD to address that issue.
Yeah, thank you. And that just goes to our Grow Our Own. How do we encourage our current students sitting in our classrooms right now to see special education as a rich and rewarding career pathway, and help support them to go out and then come back?
I'm going to agree with that, Ms. Harris. We will not, right now, in our traditional way of hiring, we will not solve this problem in that way. And the reason is, first of all, we're not the only school system. Actually, I'm just going to say everybody is struggling with the same problem. And so when you have an issue like this that is plaguing all school systems, there are but so many people out there. So it has to be something that is invented that doesn't exist to help get a head start on some of these pieces. So yes, looking at things like in our Maryland leads and thinking specifically about how can we incentivize not only just educators going into teaching, but educators who are going into teaching special education specifically, and getting that, having them work within our special education programs so that we can continue to grow our own. I do believe that we have the power to do that here locally. It has to be very strategic, and of course it will be a few years for us to get our bang out of that investment. But I do believe that is something that we're going to have to do all the things that Ms. Wiles mentioned, but in addition to that, it is something that will have to be built. I only say that because this is something that has come up with superintendents across the state, really saying, like, this is a problem we're going to have to solve, even in the state, because it's one, and I think this goes beyond just the traditional ways in which we've done things.
Yeah, I just think about this morning at our joint board meeting, pathway. pathway, get those students from here, they can get an AA in special education from MC. How do we support that? How do we, lots of opportunities there, so.
Ms. Harris,
Go ahead.
sorry, I did want to add that we have a partnership with Towson where we have several paraeducators who are currently enrolled for, in order to get their certification to teach special education. So we are working hard to promote that program and support those paraeducators so that they can get through the program, as well as I know last year what Dr. Mason implemented, which we intend to continue, is working with them on interview skills so that when they get to the point where they are ready to be employed, we can employ them.
I just had. Sorry, one more thing to say quickly, because Blueprint, I know, was on our minds in a lot of our conversation today. Another area that the Blueprint requires us map out is a career ladder, right, for teachers. And so that's work that we're going to be building out in Montgomery County. I also think this is an opportune time for us to think about what are some of these critical high-need areas that we can get certification in, that we show value in that ladder, and what does that mean for teachers and what they want. So again, many opportunities for us to just kind of build this out in a very non-traditional way that doesn't currently exist. But the career ladder is definitely one of those spaces in which I say we have much opportunity there to create a space for that certification and pathway.
Yeah, I agree. And one last question for Mr. Riley. So you talked earlier about the fund balance issue, and I know a lot of times in your world, coming up with these numbers is as much an art as it is a science. Looking at the inflation projections. So, and you're, in the appendix, you're kind of projecting out increased costs based on inflationary pressures. And as we're looking at the ESSER cliff and things like that, do we have, again, this gets to an art as much as a science, sense of the extent to which we are going to need to continue to build in those kinds of inflationary cushions in our budget? Or is there a sense that things are going to kind of level out a little bit as we get through, the next 6, 9, 12 months?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we were speaking about that today. So, we're looking out a year ahead. One thing that might be beneficial is we were talking about maybe doing a multi-year operating budget where we look at a few years. It's going to make that particular decision even more difficult because, that's even hard looking at a year. But we feel we're in good shape with the amount of funds that we have allocated towards inflation. But again, it's a tough thing to estimate. But
thank you.
Sure.
Mrs. Evans, did you have a question?
So I actually did. Thank you for the level of detail that you provided to us around special education. Ms. Harris and I were on the exact same page because she asked the question that I was going to ask around staffing, and then you answered the question that I had wrote down to myself about contractual services. But that goes to just the need being so great, and the staffing not being available. And I don't know if this is necessarily a question, but it seems as though COVID probably to some degree exacerbated some of our issues, particularly with our younger students that are coming into our public school system that didn't have that access very early on to be able to, I can't think of when our children are about to enter the school system, if parents feel as though, is it Rocking Horse or Child Fine? Yeah, that they would be able to go to Child Fine. I know probably during the pandemic, a lot of our parents weren't able to do that. So just hopeful about our Grow Our Own program, and just keep telling us what you need so that we can think about ways that we can be able to support, because it's really important. So anyway, I just thank you for being so honest and coming up here and just sharing what the needs are, because they are great, right? And it's difficult to be able to come up here in front of us and say exactly what you need sometimes, because there are a lot of competing interests, but it's all important, and we need our community as well as our local leaders to hear what the needs look like so that we can together think about how we tackle some of these challenges that we have. Because Dr. McKnight always says that these are not our challenges by ourselves. We do need the support and help of others, and so I'm really appreciative of the partnerships that we have. Ms. Harris spoke to our partners that we met with earlier, and so I hope that we're able to do a countywide summit so we can talk about how great the needs are, and then do our as Kevin Beverly said, our evangelism on a smaller level, telling people how they could better support our school system. So it's not in just ways where we're providing our students the skills they need, right, in order to matriculate through our system and to move on after high school on to college and career, but just the needs that we need while they're here. So anyway, just thank you all, and I know we're not finished, but you all do, and Mr. Riley, a lot of work in the budget season. So I do appreciate all your staff out in the audience and all that's done, and all the questions that we ask, and on the spot, give us the number of preschool students, and you all know that. So I'm just looking forward to continuing the conversation and asking the questions. So don't be afraid to answer, because we're not trying to put you on the spot or get you in trouble. We're just trying to understand what the needs are so we can figure out how to better tackle getting the resources and being able to explain out in the community to our local officials and to the people that pay taxes, that support our public school system, why it's important for us to do what we're doing and how it impacts all of us, right? So thank you.
I wanted to ask my EML question. I've been on the board, this is the start of my 5th year, and the numbers that I'm seeing here for both emergent multilingual services and special education are big. And correct me if I'm wrong, but $73.8 million for emergent multilingual and $305 million for special education. That's a lot of money. And these are not accelerators. These are what our students need. These are services that they deserve, special education by law, and English language learner development so that they can be the multilingual learners that we know they are. So I just wanted to correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm not remembering correctly, but these are huge numbers because the need of our students is great. Demonstrated need, not optional. So I just wanted to make that point, and then to better understand the emergent multilingual budget, I think one of my colleagues asked already, the way that you fund schools and services has not changed. Is that correct? 25 positions is all you're adding? Am I reading that correctly or no?
It is for this now. We are looking to add more in an accelerator. Potentially, we know that with the numbers of students that come in, we continue to need additional ELD staffing. But for this, currently, we're asking for 25, yes.
And 29 million .7 buys you what? Oh, I'm sorry, wrong number. 78.3.
Salaries.
So 78.3, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the total 826 positions for all of this K-12. So that includes 760 teachers, K-12, 17 resource teachers at the high school level, and then 48 paraeducators, K-12, mostly middle and high.
This is not additional, this is the ELL staffing.
That's our
for the whole
staffing.
district.
Yes.
Okay, but have you done that in other slides where you've presented the entire budget? It seems like it was just
So slides that have the pie chart, that is the full budget. In this particular slide, we didn't show the pie chart, we just put that at the top line. So, yeah, sorry about that confusion, but here we were talking about the total budget, and then the lines below it are additions.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Ms. Rivera-Oven.
Actually, Ms. Jen had it first, so I'm going to let her go first.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I actually, I turned it on, couldn't before Ms. Evans said, but I really want to echo what Mrs. Evans says and what Mrs. Sylvester said later. We talk about two-way communication as one of the important things we do. And in that communication is we need to communicate our need to our families, to people who do not have students in our MCPS systems, and to our different level of government officials and I was looking at our international office, the mission data yesterday. I know that we were educated that the budget is based on the county's allocation, is based on the September 30 enrollment. And yet we continue to enroll thousands of students last year after September 30th. So these students all need services, need regular classroom instruction. So these are the narrative stories that we need to share, numbers that we need to share with our families and our communities so that we can better serve our students. Our challenge is not just our challenge, right? It's all of us. We cannot operate in silos. Everyone's on board to help our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yang. Ms. Rivera Alvin?
Yeah, I'm not going to be repetitive, but I do have a couple questions before I forget. So with the special education, you have a budget for 4K for equipment. Could you just enlighten me a little bit? Is that equipment like for PE, for learning? It just seems very low to me, because how many kids do we have in special education in the system?
We have approximately 20,000 students who are students eligible under IDEA. That's for a very specific population of students, our students with physical disabilities. So that equipment could be wheelchairs, walkers, things that are specifically for that population of students. So it would be a smaller number because we don't have as many students.
Very, very small to me compared to the whole budget. So I just want to make sure that we are accommodating the most vulnerable in our school system, but
Absolutely. And just to clarify another point on that, other students who may require equipment, assistive technology, it would not come out of that equipment budget, but we do have supplies and materials that if a student needed, I heard someone talk about a larger screen computer. I think Dr. McKnight talked about that. If that is required based on the student's IEP, we would also fund that.
Oh, okay. Got you. Thank you. Yeah, and the supplies. So the other question I had on the other slide was you talk about the Clarksburg Elementary School is going to have it will host an autism program. Could you just tell me about how many kids that would be serving?
I do not have those numbers.
Okay.
I can get those for you.
Okay, thank you. And then going on to slide 20, did I hear RICA? Did somebody mention RICA as one of the programs?
Yes.
Okay. I just would be interested to know if there has been an increase on the need with the RICA students. And are you increasing the budget for that, or is it about the same?
So what we've done is provide RICA some of the support, related service providers, staff, I forget the name of the teacher. I'll find that in a second. But we want to align the supports that we have in our other specialty programs, specialty schools, so that RICA students have the same supports.
Okay, that would be great. I'm all for that. And then the last one, I was just wondering the increase of the 24% for the nursing projected increase. This is just for special ed, correct? This is just in special ed. Is the contracting through HHS? Is that totally separate from that kind? I'm sorry, I'm new. So
no.
Yeah.
Excellent question. No, so we did an RFP last spring for nursing agencies, and this is specifically for students who need private duty nurses, one-on-one nursing services throughout their school day. And what we found is that when we did the RFP last year, that the hourly rates for those agencies that we had been contracting with went up pretty significantly.
This is like a specialty
Correct.
care, somebody that needs to be with the child.
Correct. It could be our medically, it most impacts our students who are medically fragile. So our students at Longview, Stephen Knowles, who may have needs such as feeding tubes and what have you. So those are the students that primarily would have PDNs.
Thank you. And I just want to echo what Ms. Sylvester said and Mrs. Evans about, these are not optional. This is, I was looking at the budget, same as you, and it really caught my eye that these are not things that we can go without. And for the public, right, we have a fiscal responsibility to explain, but when you hear about, for example, and that's why I asked her about the specialty of nursing, right? That is something that is not optional. That is something that our kids need, and that's an increase. That's quite an increase. So thank you.
And I wanted to answer your question about the numbers. So we're projecting 12 students with autism to be placed in the Clarksburg program.
Thank you.
One comment to what Board Member Oven just mentioned. One thing we should consider as we look at this budget, because that was a great example of the contractual services that we provide, the same inflation and costs that we are talking about that have impacted the school system, it's the same for all of the contractual services. So what we had been paying before for any contractual services, we should expect that there is a big bump now in the costs for those services, many of them ones that are not flexible that we have to provide. So when you think about the school system budget, some of it is about some of the costs that are incurred that we have to manage within, but we're feeling the same impact from all of the others that we partner with. So I just wanted to point that out because that's going to be a theme as we continue to look at contractual services throughout the entire budget.
Mrs. Wolf?
Listen, we try to not be repetitive, but I don't care because I'm probably going to be a little bit repetitive. We have a new county council. The majority of them probably don't have children in their schools. I know that we're scheduling meetings, joint meetings between the board and the council, but nothing beats actually seeing these programs. Seeing Longview. If you've never been to Longview, you need to go over there and see how much staff is needed just to service 3 or 4 kids. So I wanted to suggest that maybe that's something that we should think about doing. Scheduling a visit to Rica, scheduling a visit to Longview, scheduling a visit to the Newcomers Center, because we're taking in 2,000 kids a year. Many of them are traumatized. They're coming from situations that we're going to have to provide over and above services for. And I think that there's nothing that beats seeing that. I mean, you can tell them all you want, but they really need to see it. But I also wanted to respond to something that Ms. Yang said, this whole idea of two-way communication. I know that your plan is to take the budget show on the road, if I could use that term. I think that you need to find a way to share with people what the plan is when you can't find enough special ed teachers. How are you going to support these kids? How are you going to support the emergent language learners if you can't find enough teachers? Because that's what people really want to know. Most of them really know already that you just can't find enough people. So they want to know, what are you going to be able to do about it to support their kids? So I think when you take it on the road, they at least need to know they know you're thinking about it, but they're going to want to hear some specifics, I think. Thank you.
Yes, I echo that comment. When I was reviewing the budget binder, my eyes popped out when I saw the number of special education positions, given the challenges that we've had filling them. So the recruitment and creative problem solving around bringing on more of these critical positions is, it's just something we have to stay laser focused on. Of course, grow our own, but also, how are we going to fill all these positions? We don't want to have savings in these positions because our students need the support. So, I know that's a concern of everyone, but just want to emphasize staffing, 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 outside the box, more and more and more.
And I appreciate that, and that is something that we're very focused on. And so I just wanted to highlight that we're kind of at the cusp of the recruitment season right now, and so we are really trying to get ahead of the game this year and make sure that we're focusing on knowing where we have shortages and what we need now, so that we're not having the conversation over the summer, but doing it now. And one of the presentations at the February 7th board meeting, HR will be here to discuss some of the recruitment efforts that they have going on and some specific things that they're doing to target these hard-to-fill areas, such as special ed. And I really appreciate Ms. Wild's close work with Human Resources, as she mentioned, to make sure that, we're working together to fill those positions.
Thank you. Mrs. Nadrowski?
Yeah, thanks. I had a question in reference to how we are calculating, figuring in our request for salary increases and things like that. I know we're still in the negotiation processes for a lot of these things. So we kind of pick a number, but in terms of us having a, fairly largely, I think it's a majority of new members of the county council, and really trying to ensure that we are not asking for what we hope will be agreed on by the council, but what we actually need, and just making sure that we are really asking for as much resources from the county as we possibly can. And as I've been having conversations with Mr. Hall and looking at some of the slides of how our funding, our percentage of budget funding, countywide budget funding has decreased over the years and things like that, I think that there is a lack of education and information to most people. Like, I didn't realize that when I first joined the board, we had a 53%, we were 53% of our county's budget, and now we are, 47% or something like that. I didn't know that. I would be shocked if many of our old council members were aware, recognized that as particularly the new ones. So this is all built up to say, as we do our advocacy, as we do our lobbying to the council, and even at the state level, we know that with the blueprint, there's an expectation that our floor will be, at a set amount, 60,000. But to Dr. McKnight's consistent point, the floor can't be our ceiling. We need to do better. We want to be able to recruit highly qualified and, specialized staff members. And so how are we calculating what the ask is here, and whether or not, and determining whether or not we should be asking for more than that, whether it both be for salary increases or even some of the, because I do have a question about some of the accelerators for Chapter 1, but you can answer that if that's possible.
Sure, and I'll let Mr. Riley as well. I just wanted to clarify, we're at 49% now, so it was down from 53% to 49, which 4 percentage points might not seem like a lot, but it equates to, about $230 million if we were still funded at the rate we were, a decade ago. And so as far as the salaries and wages go, we did a lot of work looking at what other districts are providing and kind of where we sit comparative to other districts. And as it's been noted a few times already today, we all know that $60,000 isn't going to cut it for Montgomery County. We have the highest cost of living in the state. We have the most students, and that means the most staff. And so for us to continue to excel as a school district, we know we're going to need to be well above that. And so we spend a lot of time looking at what that needs to look like this year, but also in future years as we work towards the 20 26, when all of the districts across the state will be at a minimum of 60,000. Many of them, like Montgomery County, will be well above that. And so that's really going to level the playing field across the state. And so for us to then attract teachers, continue to attract great teachers, we're going to need to be well above that 60,000. And so that's kind of the framework that we're thinking of it and the way that we're approaching it.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add, so the number that we showed in the beginning, the $145 million, that includes benefits as well, too. So in addition to having an attractive salary package, our benefits package is going to help recruit staff members, too. So that includes pension. There was an increase in state pension as well, too. And then our EBP, or health benefit plan as well, too.
Okay. I know it's a major process and everything. I just want to make sure that we're really holding on to the staff that we have, as well as being able to recruit what we need. A couple of questions about the accelerators. I was excited to see that you're expanding the two-way immersion schools program. And one of my questions, the middle years program, it was my understanding that we had already had a middle years program. I'm not going to say it was our policy, but it was sort of a, from a past several years ago, past budget, that we had funded to ensure we had middle years programs for all of the IB programs. That's not correct
Cover that the last.
currently?
No, go ahead. Just saying, we're doing accelerators at our last budget session, but go ahead and answer
Well,
that.
it's for chapter one, so I just figured.
Yes. I'm sorry, Ms. Hazel?
I did not, we don't have middle years programs connected to all of our IB programs currently. That was never my understanding that we would, but I know that we are looking to increase what we have. So I don't know if you're speaking to something in the past?
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago. Seneca Valley had been advocating for years and years and years. Before I was on the board, I stood there and gave testimony to include the middle years program there. We did put one in, and I thought during the conversations of that we were actually funding one at each of our schools that have feeds into the IB programs, or some of the IB programs. But I also know we've expanded our IB program, so maybe that has something to do with it. But does this bring us to having one for every school, or no?
So we haven't identified the schools yet. We just knew that we needed to expand middle years program because, and I want to say it was 2018-19 or 19-20. I just remember Scott Murphy here, and we were going through the whole presentation of expanding IB so that we could create more opportunity and access. And we did not connect a middle years program to those. So we haven't identified the schools yet. The goal would be that for all schools that feed into high school, and there's oftentimes a number of middle schools, but if we can at least start to expand that, into making sure that at least one of the middle schools, and then expand to more over time, can feed into those. That's exactly what we're trying to do. Another goal is, we were talking about this earlier, we have got to increase the rigor beyond just starting it more in high school, particularly with, again, talking about backing up the definition or the criteria for college and career readiness. And so this is also one way to address that.
Okay. Well, I like the accelerators you have in here. I mean, obviously, there's always more we can add, but.
Yes, and I think it was a perfect example of one that we can do over time. I mean, I'll just pick one high school, or one high school could have as many as 3 middle schools feeding into it, and some more. So if going back to those IBs in 2019, I'm pretty sure that was the year that we started to expand to make sure that those programs are accessible. I think it's astute of us to build that out over time, which is why you see the accelerator in there, not covering all of the middle schools, but at least looking to make sure there's an alignment between that expansion of IB. And also, again, I come back to everything that we've learned since COVID-19. We've had middle years programs for some time now. What have we learned, and what do we need to do differently in those programs that meet the needs of our learner, that we can build on, that would allow us to implement it so it could be more meaningful to students in these new expansion of middle years programs, to also then support the middle year programs that already exist to become, even more robust in the services they provide to students.
So this expands for 4, this includes funding for 4, expansion of 4 schools?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. And I'll ask about other accelerators the last work session. I just wanted to reach out about that one.
Thank you.
Ms. Harris?
Yeah, just a clarifying question, I think it's been answered. So the Chapter 1 accelerators, we're going to go into detail about all of them next week. And then I'll just, coming attractions.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
Very interested in both the two-way immersion and the innovative calendar schools. And I do have a little concern that we're halfway through this school year, and if we're planning to start, 3 additional two-way immersion, 2 additional innovative calendar, we haven't identified those schools yet. The launch of these programs in other schools historically has not gone well because of the way the community engagement was handled. So as we look to really improve that process, I would say the sooner the better.
Absolutely, and thank you for saying that. Dr. Murphy, we can be prepared to talk about the plan, and it actually is to do exactly what you said. We know if we opened up the budget, say that these were the things that we wanted to expand, and we, in isolation, identified the schools, then we may not have the investment and the input from those schools. So we agreed to engage in a process in which we would work from a set of criteria. These are potential schools that we're looking at, engage those schools in terms of, is this a good time? What are some things that we need to consider about your current staffing, the programs that you have, all of those things, so that we would elicit their investment from the very beginning. And I have to tell you, it's wonderful. I know the process has already started with having schools engage in the conversation around our opportunity project of having multiple teachers in like that house of students. And it's so nice when schools say, I'm interested, and I want to bring not just the principal, but the teachers and others to that discussion, so we can really think about, is this an opportunity that's appropriate for our school, and why now is the good time? So that's been our approach, which is why we didn't come to this saying we've identified the schools. We wanted to talk about it, talk about the vision of it, and then engage our schools in, okay, now who wants to be a part of this?
Right. Any data we could take to those schools to show, the success of it so far would be very inspirational, I would think, too.
Yes, we've been sharing some research with them that we've learned from other schools and other districts nationally, so that they can actually see some of the opportunity that we've been looking at. And even when we talk about a number of these models, we know it's not cookie cutter, because we've got to figure out what does it mean for us here in Montgomery County and in our particular schools that intend to pilot. So again, it's maybe taking from a blueprint of something else that we've learned from, but building it out to meet our needs specifically.
And if I can just provide one point of clarification, we'll be looking at the accelerators in the 3rd meeting. So this is the first of 3. We'll be looking at them all then. And the reason we chose to do that is so that we can kind of present them as the comprehensive vision behind them, because none of them stand alone. We put a lot of thought into what it's going to take to move the district forward and benefit our students. And it really is a comprehensive plan that we're going to present with all of the accelerators and what that vision is behind them. So that will be coming.
So also piggybacking on that comment, I also, for the accelerator presentation, do want to see the program evaluation data on all the accelerators. Dual language, middle years, innovative school year calendar, which I know we've had a preliminary presentation, but that presentation itself says we need to revisit this because it was all in the midst of the pandemic. And tutoring. There is some tutoring money in the budget, but we need to know if it's working. Our efforts so far, who is accessing it? Is there access, equitable access, and is it working as an effective strategy? And if it's not, then how have we shifted so that we can make best use of those dollars? And a question that I've had from the community is improving math and literacy is a priority for the board. It's a priority for the superintendent. Why don't we see any additional dollars in the budget to reflect that priority? And not having an informed answer, I said, well, probably because it's covered already with our existing budget. But what do I tell people? Why isn't there, do we not need any additional dollars to improve our math and literacy across the board? Is it covered in the existing budget? And if so, where?
I actually would say it's all over the entire budget in terms of thinking about the academics and improving math and literacy. We've talked about a few here. Some of the things that I'll say create to the foundation of it is the staff, the investment in the professional development for the staff, the programming, whether it's the expansion of the AP and IB in high school, middle years program, elementary school. One of the biggest investments we made in literacy last year was making sure we put in that literacy coach. And that was just a start of last year. So some of it is, Ms. Silvestri, some investments that we've already made and will continue to, and others are that we continue to build on. The tutoring, you know, and that's why I'm excited that we'll be able to bring some of that back. But I mean, some of the tutoring services that our schools have been able to provide, and that's been at all levels. In our elementary schools, of course, you know, some of our schools provide an in-person tutoring program before and after school. So those are things that we're seeing that help support from an intervention perspective. You know, the extended learning time. This is the biggest investment I'll say is that extended learning time is also one when we talk about increasing our innovative calendar schools. All the research says as a result of the pandemic, children need more time in school. And so, and then it is when we give them more time, what are we doing with them? What are the professionals learning and how are they supporting them? And what programs have we found to be most successful in doing that? So we'll be prepared to come and talk about that more specifically when we talk about the accelerators to make sure that there is a particular match to it. And I think, you know, just based on your comment, if our community is asking that question, then we can definitely make sure we create the visuals so that they can see how those, and we actually already have a sheet. Actually, it's our budget accelerators. We've identified each of the accelerators in our budget that we've connected to each of those priorities, the board strategic priorities. So I think that'll be a great way to inform the public exactly what those investments are. So we I think pretty much have that ready, but that'll be a good piece for us to share.
I mean, the current accelerators in this budget target a small number of students when you look at the entire school system, right? So dual language will affect a couple hundred, middle years, couple hundred. But I think we're interested in 160,000 students. What are the key levers that we either invested in previous years, your reading specialist example is a good one, or are investing in this year so that we can say, these are the key levers and it's covered, or it's going to be covered, so that we can see the expected results soon.
And can I add, from the last budget, we implemented the science of reading at for all of our schools at the primary level to address the reading challenges that we were experiencing. So all of the training that we provided, every school has a reading specialist, and they are working very closely with our office and the Office of School Support and Wellbeing to implement these the new reading instruction with our new resources. We have a new assessment that we use with our budget from last school year, our Dibbles assessment, and so a lot of training on that. And we also purchased a lot of interventions. So in collaboration with special education, we identified approximately 10 interventions in literacy and mathematics that we agreed are research-based, and we trained our staff on, either teachers, paraeducators, to provide interventions before, during, after school, in addition to the tutoring. So we just want to make sure that it takes time to see the results, that we want to continue to provide ongoing, just-in-time training, helping our teachers look at the data, make sense of it, and make those next instructional decisions. So a lot of what we implemented last year with our budget, we're working on for this school year. And, you know, so that's really where a lot of our work is headed for even for next year, is just continue with what we're doing, and the program evaluation, I think, is another really critical area for us. We're learning a lot about what we've implemented, whether or not it's working. In a few weeks, we're going to share with you our evaluation from the Center for Applied Linguistics on our emergent multilingual learners. This is it. We're going to share it with you soon. It's over 300 pages. So we have a lot of recommendations here, too, that we can continue to work on. But I think we're doing the work that we set out to do, and it's reflected in the budget.
I think that we're lucky that our community wants to support our students and continue to support our students, but they need to hear concrete. This is what we're doing to move the needle on literacy and math. And I, as your number one fan, also need the language to be able to respond when I get a question like that. We're doing this, this, and this, and we've seen progress in these two things, and these are promising, so that we can do our job as board members, but also to bring on our entire community to support this budget and future budgets.
Ms. Silvestri, thank you for that. This is, just hearing you share that out, what we just talked about was how each budget year should look like building blocks. Sometimes this is one of the difficulties of talking about a budget every year, is that it actually is never in isolation of the year before and how we're building on it. So thank you, Ms. Hazel, for mentioning that, because quite frankly, last year when you look at most of our investments around literacy and mathematics, they were overall for the entire district, which is why this year you see more specialized programs. So this made me think about it, to what you just said in terms of improving communication with our community. In our accelerators, why don't we just start from last year? I continue to focus on last year was a starting point, because that was the first year, while it was a disruptive one, that we were actually back in school, and started to, bless you, think about what the investments are that are needed to support the continued recovery of COVID-19 and to continue to support, accelerate, and innovate. So as we build out that piece, I think it would be that document for the public and for our board members to be able to use. Why don't we go back to here with the investments we had last year, and then show how the investments this year are building on that, because it's not a one-year discussion. Thank you for that feedback.
Ms. Wolf?
Yeah, I have a question about the evaluation that I hope you're doing on tutoring. I'm curious, and you don't have to tell me now, I'll wait for the report, as to what you're showing as the indicators of success, because we get a lot of qualitative data, but I don't know that I know if I'm seeing success, if you could understand what I'm trying to say. I mean, what kind of quantitative data is going to prove that to me? Also, I'm a little bit concerned because I'm hearing a lot in the community that people are not being turned away from tutoring, that there's nobody to tutor them. And so, as Ms. Silvestri said, you know, we've got a large amount of money and it's covering a small amount of people. What are we going to do to make adjustments for that so that we're serving all of those that need to be served with additional resources?
So we to answer your first question, in terms of the quantitative data, we are using our district and external assessments to determine how students are doing. It is a little challenging because every student receives a different amount of tutoring services. Some go once a week, some might get 2 or 3 days a week, so it's difficult sometimes to compare how well it's going, but we are using our district and external assessments to make those determinations. So we'll share how our students are doing. And yes, we are hearing from some of our parents and community that there aren't enough physical teachers in the building to provide the after school or before school in-person support, which is what a lot of our families want, the in-person. But there are many families who also want the virtual. And so we have the two vendors. One of our vendors in one day had a request for over 1,000 families asking for services. So they are hiring more. So we'll be coming to you to look to provide them with more funding so that they can hire more tutors for the virtual. And then we are finalizing our application with OHRD to hire community members to support our schools with in-person tutoring. So we have a lot of community groups, retirement centers, sororities, fraternities, lots of groups that are looking to support, and then we have individual community members also. So we're putting a process in place to interview community members and have them in schools, starting with those schools that have the greatest need and don't have the physical bodies present to do the tutoring.
Okay, so if I could just ask one follow-up question. The people that you're hiring from the community that the tutoring companies are going to hire, are these people trained in structured literacy? Are they trained in, and it escapes me right now, Eureka math?
Right.
Because, I mean, that's a very specific way of teaching, as you know,
Yes,
in
it is.
Eureka math.
So they may not be right now. We have a new person that just started today that will be responsible in central office, that will be responsible for hiring these individuals, and they will train, put together a small team to train individuals in certain areas for literacy and mathematics. They can't train them on everything, so we're going to have to really pinpoint what areas or particular large standards we want the tutors to have and be able to implement with the students. So it's going to be a little more targeted so that we can make sure they have the information and the materials they need for the students.
Thank you.
Ms. Yang?
Yes, I'm glad to hear we will get some report on some of the evaluation of these programs. When you present the tutoring data, I was wondering if you can provide some utilization metrics, such as, how many, not only how many students use it, but the times they're ongoing tutor a student, how many times a student uses a service. And also if we can do it by geographic location or even by school, so we want to identify, hopefully, if there are success stories that they are transferable to other parts of the county or other schools. So I would really appreciate a utilization metrics. Thank you.
I want to thank every one of you for the discussion today and the presentation. I like the new format. And look forward to our next 2 work sessions. Thank you.